Once, this game was everything. Friends, survival, chaos. A world where everything mattered. For years, Apocalypse Rising stood at the top of Roblox's survival genre. A place where alliances were forged and trust was broken in a heartbeat. But eventually, everything changed, and nothing was ever the same. To really understand how it all fell apart, we need to go back to where it all started. July 1st, 2012, Apocalypse Rising releases as version 1. Roblox at the time was a completely different world. The front page was ruled by tycoons, obbies, roleplay hangouts, and the occasional shooter. Survival games, they existed, but they didn't dominate the culture, and definitely not in the way apoc did. Most games in that era took months, sometimes years to build a loyal player base, but Apocalypse Rising, from day one, it felt different. Sure, it wasn't the most complex game ever made on paper. It was pretty simple, but it nailed the atmosphere, and that was enough to hook people for hours. The concept itself was heavily inspired by the PC legend DayZ, and that was fine. Roblox has always had games inspired by big titles outside the platform. For example, Counterblocks in CSGO, Strucid in Fortnite. You get the idea, the list goes on. The difference was, apoc didn't feel like a cheap copy. It had its own soul. You'd spawn on the edge of the map with nothing but a Makarov pistol, flashlight, a can of beans, and some soda. No armor, no car, no backup, just you, your wits, and the world ahead. From there, you had to scavenge for gear, loot towns, and take down enemies to climb your way up to being the most feared player in the server. Every match was different. You could be looting an empty farmhouse 1 minute and fighting for your life against a fully geared squad the next. You might stumble upon a loyal teammate you trust for life, or the single player who'd become your greatest enemy. The stakes were simple: survive or lose everything. And back then, it was impossible to be on Roblox and not hear the name Apocalypse Rising. By the end of the year that it was released, 2012, apoc had already racked up an impressive 5 million visits. Now a lot of you might be thinking, 5 million doesn't sound like a lot, but you've got to put yourself back in that time period. This was 2012. Roblox wasn't anywhere near as massive as it is today. Back then, 5 million visits was insane. That's like pulling in tens of millions of visits today. Practically everyone who had played Roblox at that time had at least once heard of Apocalypse Rising, and most people had given it a try. And remember, this was only half a year. The game dropped in July. Despite that, it ended 2012 ranked as the 14th most visited game on the entire platform. Think about that. Think about what that means. Apocalypse Rising, a hardcore zombie survival game, was going toe-to-toe with tycoons, obbies, and roleplay games, which were dominating the front page. It stood out like a sore thumb, but in the best way possible. And it didn't stop there. Apocalypse Rising was also nominated for Roblox's top 5 best video game trailers. Trailers back then weren't even common. Most games just threw up a thumbnail and hoped for clicks. So for apoc's trailer to stand out so much that it got second place overall, that was wild. It showed that Gusmanak and Zolarketh weren't just making a game, they were building a brand around it. So by the end of 2012, apoc wasn't just another popular title. It had already made its mark as one of Roblox's most ambitious and exciting games. But this was just the beginning, because 2013 would take everything to another level. 2013 proved that the prior year was just a small taste of what was to come. The game's exact visit count for that year isn't clear, but we don't even need to know the exact number to know it was massive. Why? Because Apocalypse Rising was officially crowned as Roblox's Game of the Year in 2013. That was the big one. Out of every single game on the platform, apoc was the one that Roblox themselves picked to showcase. You couldn't escape hearing about this game. It was everywhere. People were making videos about it, fan groups were popping up, and Roblox's own blog wouldn't stop mentioning it. If you were active on the site in 2013, you absolutely heard the name Apocalypse Rising at least once. For a lot of people, it was the game that defined what Roblox could actually do when devs pushed the limits. People literally joined Roblox just to play apoc. 2014 though, was when things started to slow down just a little bit. Don't get me wrong, the game was still one of Roblox's biggest hits, but that crazy upward momentum from 2012 and 2013 started to level out. Still, it had already cemented itself as one of the most iconic survival games Roblox had ever seen. And yet, lurking under all that success was a problem that would eventually tear everything apart. This is where the story takes a darker turn. Like I said earlier, Roblox has always had problems with exploiters. Practically every game on the platform has had to deal with it at some point. But for Apocalypse Rising, the problem wasn't just a few hackers here and there. It became something much bigger. Exploiting had been around in apoc since it basically came out, but at first it was manageable. The devs could patch one script and the game would be fine for a while. But slowly, year by year, the number of cheaters started creeping up, and then it exploded. By 2014, the problem was getting bad enough to where the players were visibly getting frustrated. People were blaming Gusmanac, accusing him of not caring, when in reality he was doing everything he could possibly do behind the scenes. You could literally see his frustration in the way he'd respond to players. He'd patch one exploit and then 2 or 3 new ones would pop up just days later. It was a never-ending battle. Then came late 2014 into 2015, when Roblox suffered a massive breach. Tons of games had their files stolen, including Apocalypse Rising. This was devastating, because the game's code was leaked. Cheaters suddenly had everything they needed. They weren't just guessing anymore, they had the blueprint. This let people make modded versions of apoc, and a lot of players actually started switching over to those because, ironically, they didn't have cheaters. Suddenly, kids who barely knew how to script were able to run wild with God mode. Not just that, teleport hacks, no clip, one-click kill scripts, lag switches, you name it. It got to a point where YouTube was filled with videos literally advertising Apocalypse Rising exploit scripts. The floodgates had opened, and the community suffered for it. I used to play the game a lot around 2016, and I can tell you, it was infuriating. Every time you met a cheater, you'd lose hours of progress instantly. That's of course if you would even be able to make it a couple of hours before dying to one of them. Imagine grinding for days to get that perfect loadout, only for some kid with God mode toggle to wipe you out in one click. The game's entire soul was being sucked away. By the time 2016 rolled around, it was obvious this was out of control. Even with patches and updates, the cheaters always stayed one step ahead. And eventually, Gusmanac admitted defeat. About 9 years ago, he announced that the game would no longer receive major updates. It was simply too outdated, too vulnerable, and too broken to save. And that announcement marked the official end of Apocalypse Rising's golden era. Even today, if you join the game, you'll probably find more exploiters than legit players. And honestly, that's kind of the tragic punchline to all of this. For the loyal fans, hope wasn't fully gone, because while apoc 1 was crumbling, Gusmanac and his team had been secretly working on something new, Apocalypse Rising 2. The announcement of apoc 2 sent the community into a frenzy. People were hyped, imagining a fresh start, maybe even a game that would be free from all those exploiters. And after years of waiting, the big day came. July 28th, 2017. Well, it was supposed to. The game was set to release in alpha for a staggering 1,000 Robux. Looking back, that's a crazy price tag. But at the time, people were still ready to pay it. After all, it was apoc 2. But then came disaster. Literally an hour before launch, the devs delayed it. They pushed the date forward, and the hype train crashed. People were furious. Imagine staying up all night like it's Christmas, kicking your feet up and down, just to be told, nah, not today. Fans demanded the price to be lowered as an apology, but the devs stood firm. When the game finally launched, it was still locked behind that 1,000 Robux paywall. Personally, I remember paying about 500 Robux for early access, and honestly, I played it once and never really came back. I think a lot of players had the same experience. They wanted the magic of apoc 1, but it just didn't hit the same. Still, apoc 2 has managed to build a decent player base over time, so clearly there are people who enjoy it. And although the remake obviously still has hackers here and there, one thing's for certain, it's nothing compared to the chaos of apoc 1. And I guess that's a massive plus. For me though, nothing will ever replace the original Apocalypse Rising. The highs, the lows, the betrayals, the grinding, the cheaters. It was one of the most iconic Roblox experiences of all time. If you've made it this far, drop a like and a star in the comments. I love seeing the real ones show support. And let me know your thoughts and experiences with the game. I'll gladly read everything. The last video that I made got a bunch of insanely nice comments, which genuinely made my day every time I saw one. So remember guys, that I appreciate every single one of you. Also, if you have any suggestions of what you would like me to cover next, then feel free to drop it all in the comments. If you want to see something insane as this story was, then click the video that just popped up on your screen. This was the story about the Roblox icon that got destroyed by cheaters. What a sad topic this was to cover.